Hello, I'm Jonathan Womack. Welcome to this edition of Community Insider. We're going to be talking about trees and giving you more information about trees through the Panther Creek Forestry and Mr. Ben Myers. A little bit later, we're going to introduce you to Michael Griffith, Senior Vice President of Security Federal, and tell you more about what Security Federal is doing using Ben and the consultation services of Panther Creek.
And then you might be like what we decided to do is kind of repurpose some of the trees that we actually had. And what I have here today is actually a pretty nice maple table that was made out of the slab of one of the maple trees that was here on the west lawn. It was a great opportunity for us to kind of repurpose. We've made cutting boards and various things. And unfortunately, we've got another maple tree that's fixing to come up that we consulted with Ben, and we decided that it's past its prime. It's been a beautiful tree for many, many years, and we've enjoyed it, but it's not safe. And to protect the overall trees that we've got, Ben made the recommendation that we want to harvest that tree and maybe repurpose it into something else and come back with a better planting, maybe some landscaping, so these other trees will stay healthy.
Well, we've made it to Short Springs State Natural Area in Tullahoma, Tennessee. We're going to see some more beautiful wildflowers here at Short Springs. Come on with us. This is a mound of rocks, one of two right here together, where the rivers meet. And this area is covered with wildflowers, spring beauties, dwarf larkspur, phlox.
Welcome to another edition of Community Insider. Join us as we travel Middle Tennessee, uncovering history and experiencing the adventure of unique stories and events coming to you inside your community.
We have Mr. Ben Myers, who is with Panther Creek Forestry. You've been doing this since 2002, is that right?
That's correct.
And you are a consultant forester.
That's correct.
And there's a whole lot that is listed in what you do. It's not just that you find forestry so that you can sell it for logs, but you also help in urban areas also for customers and people that's watching today, right?
That's correct.
Explain to us what all you do.
So I started out, working in logging and timber, and then transitioned more and more into forest management planning, and then over the last 5 or 6 years, a lot into urban forestry to give advice on trees in people's yards, as well as trees in people's woods.
I got you. Now, the folks that's watching that sometimes they even call me and ask questions. I've got this tree that's got co-dominant limb. It's got included bark. What do we do? Your company has several different professionals that can come look at their tree. You can give them ideas on what they might could do and what they could not do. In some situations, just like we're talking about one tree today, a little bit later, that will actually be having to be taken down. From what you've looked at, you've done everything you can for it. Now it's maybe matured to the point that it just needs to be cut down. Is that right?
That's correct. We're always looking at the total tree health and looking at the canopy down to the roots, and what ways we can improve the growth of the tree to maintain it, or if there's a safety hazard, what steps can be taken to keep the tree in your yard, or what step, if it does need to be taken down. If it's a safety issue for you and your family, we'll advise that you take it down.
Well, I think for Warren County and the counties that's watching this, surrounding counties, we are blessed to have somebody like yourself that studied in the background of forestry. We have somebody, even on a local level, that sees our forestry. I know that there's several other forestries down through the years that's protected our forestry, but let me tell you something. It ain't just about the air we breathe, it's about what we know is home. Just like the background setting here that we're shooting from Security Federal. One of the things that makes this lawn so beautiful is the trees. But just having a beautiful lawn, just having beautiful trees isn't enough. Knowing that they're safe is important. And that's one of the issues we're talking about today here on this lawn. A little bit later, Michael's going to be coming on here. He wants to be able to preserve history, but at the same time, we've got to be safe about it. What have you done to sort of help them step by step through this process?
So over the years, we've looked at the trees, looked at the tree health. Number one, see what you have, know that you have a sugar maple versus a silver maple, and what the life history of that, what the tree's trajectory looks like. There's certain tree species that live a short time, and certain ones that will last a really, really long time. And then, how do we encourage the growth of new trees, on your yard, on this lawn? And what we've done here is trying to, take some steps to keep the trees healthy that are here, remove the ones that are unsafe, and then watch out for bugs and watch out for unsafe practices to keep pressure off these trees.
Now you've done some things, studied a whole lot about the emerald ash borer, what it does to certain ash trees. Speaking of one that's still healthy here on the lot, we're going to get some shots of that in just a little bit. What can you tell folks? Now this is an ash tree that has been treated. You have also done several other ash trees, I'm sure, with this kind of treatment. Some people wouldn't know if they could trust that. What could you tell folks about that, and why we're wanting to protect them from the emerald ash borer?
Yeah, so this is a bug that's come down from the Midwest, from Indiana and Illinois, and moved south. And just like it's been moving south through the states, the bug attacks the top of the tree first, and so it'll start. The eggs will get laid in the top of the tree, and then what I see is that the bug then girdles the branches moving down the tree, and so you'll see the damage in the top first, and the tree may still be healthy at the base, but what we see over time is that it's a two-phased situation. You have the emerald ash borer that comes in and girdles the tree as it goes down, but then there's a powder puff beetle that follows the emerald ash borer, that follows those channels through the bark, and then it basically turns the limbs to dust. And so a lot of the loggers in the community, when they see a dead ash tree, they won't even touch it because it's so dangerous to fell. If you imagine like an oak tree that dies in the woods, it'll stay there for 5 and 10 years because the tree is still sound. But with the emerald ash borer and the powder puff beetle that follows it down the bark, it becomes unsafe really quickly. So what we've seen when people are felling these in the woods is the tree will start to fall, but then the top just comes straight out of it. And that's the danger, in your yard as well, is that even a dead tree, it'll blow in the wind, but these ash trees, they'll blow and break and fall straight onto a car, straight onto a picnic table, or somebody under it. And so that's why we really got to watch the tops of the ash and look for that damage. And then on the ash, we can save them. You can kind of turn the tide on it if you want to spend the money to invest in that tree. And sometimes it's cheaper to invest in the tree than it is to take it down, depending on where it is. If you've got it in a kind of precarious situation over a house or near a house, and the tree's structurally sound still, you can chemically treat it and give it another 3 years or 5 years and hopefully we can get beyond this first wave of the emerald ash borers.
It's a battle against them, I know that, and they started showing up about 2010, somewhere around there.
That's correct.
And man, they have just killed so many trees already. And to know that, you know, where we're shooting this from, it's the nursery capital of the world. Most people know this is Tree City. We're in love with trees, and trees are so important. It's important for you to be educated on what is important for your tree, the right nutrients that your tree needs, and also what we can do to protect it. His group does that, and to be honest with you, he come on so that we can answer some of the questions that you have. One of the biggest questions people ask right now, as you see, and you have done more of this than I have, because mostly my work is in the city. You have been out in the forestry, deep forest of Warren County and surrounding counties. How is the health of our forest?
The forest is healthy, but we've got to watch these pests that are coming through on the ash in particular, and also on the hemlocks as well. That's another concern along our rivers and creeks, is the hemlock woolly adelgid. That's another thing that when you are out in the mountains and in the coves, you'll see these little white dots on the hemlock needles, and that's one of the things we're also treating for. And the hemlock provides a really cool special place on riparian corridors. It provides a lot of deep shade to keep those waters cool, and keeps our water cool, and that reduces the amount of bacteria that's growing out there in the water, and it makes a nice shady river, and really makes it pretty, especially up around places like Savage Gulf. But then when you look down that, you'll see at Savage Gulf, you can see the dead hemlocks, but then now we're seeing the dead ash as well right beside it. And so those two species are of concern. We've had a lot of concern in the past over the gypsy moth, but the Forest Service has done a good job kind of stopping that wave of moths up in Virginia. So it's kind of held off, and they do regular treatments to block that bug from coming through. We see pine beetles cycle through, but it's a native pest, and as long as your pine trees are healthy and actively growing, they're usually okay. The other there's numerous lists of scary pests coming in, from international shipping usually, and it pops off of these containers and just goes wild. And because we have such lush forests around here, that's a real concern that we got to watch for.
Some of the things that folks can do. Number one is don't haul chips across county lines.
Right.
We can try to stop
or firewood.
The spread of this, or firewood. Which changed a lot after 2010 in the emerald ash borer.
Yeah.
Those laws and those things to protect really our trees come into place because of that. And then
the one thing to jump in on the firewood was the walnut, and so we were really worried about the walnut canker back about the same time we started worrying about the emerald ash borer. But that traveled a lot of different places on firewood, but luckily that disease doesn't move as fast as the borer, and so it's kind of been contained.
Somebody might be thinking, okay, how could you have the nursery capital of the world and nurseries, and they're shipping out trees every day because they treat those trees, right?
That's correct. And some of those trees are bare root as well, and usually it's the dirt that'll cover it, and that's where we have a good staff of nursery inspectors that are looking at these trees and looking at the container grown or the bald and burlap trees to make sure that they're clean and safe before they come out of the county.
All right. Ben, we want to thank you for your time. We've still got an interview coming up with Michael Griffiths as you guys discuss, honestly, the future of the Security Federal Lawn and the importance of taking care of the trees, and one in particular that's right here behind us that has got included bark. It's got a crack down it. There's some things that you guys have been looking at with this and what the future holds for that tree and for protecting the public. Stay tuned, that and much more coming up on this edition of Community Insider.
Well, here at the West Lawn, we've got a beautiful canopy, lush grass and everything. We take a lot of time to kind of maintain that, but we need professional advice. And we reached out to Ben Myers, a professional forester, to kind of help us maintain the overall health of the trees that we've got. But occasionally some of the trees that we have kind of reached their peak, and you've got to have an opportunity to reach out to somebody that can tell you specifically how safe that tree might be. And a lot of people use this open space with our murals that we actually have here, whether it be Main Street Live and other events. And a couple of years ago, we had a maple tree that actually was going to have to be removed because it was not safe. And for those of you that are sometimes kind of uneasy about taking down old trees, I would encourage you to consult with someone like Ben, who can kind of tell you other options of maintaining the health that you've got, and then taking a look at removing that tree safely and soundly with forestry and good logging techniques. And then you might be like what we decided to do, is kind of repurpose some of the trees that we actually had. And what I have here today is actually a pretty nice maple table that was made out of the slab of one of the maple trees that was here on the west lawn. It was a great opportunity for us to kind of repurpose. We've made cutting boards and various things. And unfortunately, we've got another maple tree that's fixing to come up that we consulted with Ben, and we decided that it's past its prime. It's been a beautiful tree for many, many years, and we've enjoyed it, but it's not safe. And to protect the overall trees that we've got, Ben made the recommendation that we want to harvest that tree and maybe repurpose it into something else and come back with a better planting, maybe some landscaping, so these other trees will stay healthy. And Ben's done a great job working with us on our ash trees as well.
Now, Michael, you had mentioned earlier that, for folks that's watching out of county, what is this main area used for the most, Main Street Live and other purposes? So
the west lawn here, right beside Security Federal Savings Bank and our annex, which is home to two very wonderful artistic murals. The west lawn is a open space that we have a concert series in the summertime called Main Street Live that's been wildly successful and popular. We've also used it for various junior auxiliary events and fundraisers, whether it be Relay for Life, and just a green space for people that live downtown. Myself, I live downtown, so I walk down here a lot. The law firms that are downtown, we have a lot of people that kind of just walk their dog and kind of hang out. The city has been gracious enough to have a kind of a dog station here, and we encourage people to use that. And it's just a great space, and it's a dedicated space that we like to have for the community. And it's just a wonderful place to take pictures and kind of hang out with your family, and then we feel like it's our way of giving back to the community.
So Michael asked me to be out here to talk about the sugar maples and the ash that are on the property. One of his board members, Neil Schultz, has always had a great interest in these trees, and Neil was thinking that some of these trees were in the mid-hundreds, like 150 years old, but when we had to take down the last tree, we actually aged it, and it turned out that it was between 80 and 90 years old. And so it's surprising the growth rates, on this good soil that we have in McMinnville, that we can grow a big shade tree in that time period. And what I've encouraged Security Federal to do is to continue planting trees, on the site, so we can be growing trees into the canopy. And that's just important, when you get a yard with old trees, like this has, is to grow new trees in there, because eventually the trees get old and they senesce, and or get into a dangerous situation where they're over your roof or over a car. In this situation, some trees being over a public venue, and that's where we're talking right now. That's our latest concern. We had a recent windstorm, a lot of limbs came down, so Security Federal asked me to come out and take another look at these, and so that's where we're looking at the big sugar maple here in the back, and it's got a large seam running up the middle of the tree all the way to the top, and it's got a real V-shaped crotch. And so when you're looking at your trees in your yard, you got to worry about the V-shaped crotch and that branch connection and what's under it. And if this was out in the woods, this tree might live for another 50, 60, 100 years even. But given that there's often summer thunderstorms and we have public, for Main Street Live, my concern is that that's just too much of a risk for the community to keep the tree here. And so that's why I made the recommendation to take the tree down, and hopefully Security Federal can repurpose that tree. But in the same breath, there's also some ash in the background, and the ash are currently under threat from the emerald ash borer. And luckily these have been treated for a number of years, and so they still have healthy crowns. But all over the community, we're losing our ash trees because of that borer. And if you notice, if you do any kayaking down the Collins River or Barren Fork, you'll notice you see all these dead trees in the canopy. And those dead trees are usually ash, or killed by beavers, one or the other. But there's a lot of ash mortality, and so the borer is traveling up and down our rivers and then coming up into the yards and coves and nurseries using those rivers as kind of conduits to spread out through the whole county. And it's been moving south from the Kentucky border and moving on towards Alabama has been what's happening. You can also see a lot of ash mortality. If you go down I-40 on the way to Asheville, you see a lot of dead sticks in the woods, and most of those are ash. And ash in our forest usually comprises between 5 and 10% of the canopy. And in our area, on the lower limestone benches, there's a little bit higher percentage, and as you go up to the top of the mountain, it gets less and less. But we're going to see this issue over the next probably 1 to 3 years of losing a lot of ash, and so that's why we're continuing to treat these with some insecticide to kill those emerald ash borers and keep the trees alive. So Jonathan, we're looking here at a sugar maple, and what I was asked to do is to assess the condition of this sugar maple and see is it okay or is it not okay? What do we need to do to keep it healthy and safe? And so the number one thing you start is you can start at the bottom or the top, but I usually start at the bottom, start looking at the roots and start seeing, do you see any weird bumps? Is there signs of root damage, root rot? Because that's the number one thing that can cause a tree to come down, is you'll see lawnmower damage that'll introduce root rot into a tree. It can cause it just to break right off at the base, and you'll see that often. Then as you go up the tree, you kind of start looking for things like this seams, that are signs of it. You can see this bark that's included within the tree, and that going up the tree, and as you go up, you can see that the tree's weeping right there. So that's a sign that there's a lot of room for moisture to build up, and probably a sign of some rot in the middle of the tree. And as you go on up the tree, Jonathan, you can see that when you get about 12 feet up there, the tree has that V-shaped crotch, and that's a really scary piece of big landscape trees. And you want to watch out for that when you're growing the tree, when the tree's young. If you can trim out that V-shaped crotch, that tree can last an extra 50 years. This tree, based on its health, could last another 50 years if it didn't have that V-shaped crotch. And as you go on up even further, you can see where Security Federal tried to keep the tree together by chaining it, cabling it together, probably 10, 15 years ago. And it did cable it together, but that's right where the branch broke off in last week's storm that blew through here. And the cable stayed together, but my concern, over time is that this, given in summer thunderstorms, and this is a great venue for music and people gathering, and so my concern is that this becomes a real public safety hazard. And so that's where my recommendation to Security Federal is to take this tree down, because of the amount of community, this is a real community space that people utilize. And I've been here on Friday afternoons at the Friday night music and seen these summer thunderstorms roll through, and you don't want a lot of kids, a band being set up, and this tree split apart. And so that's the recommendation for this tree, and that's why it's got to come down. And so right here we're looking at another ash tree that is being treated for the emerald ash borer. And if you'll notice, this tree has a light green hue to it, and it looks like it leafed out a little bit later. And we're going to walk over to another ash tree that's really nice and green and looks a little bit healthier. And so that's, so me as a forester, that's what I'm looking at is, the differences in these two trees. And so this one I'm a little bit concerned about because it had a late leaf out, which indicates that the emerald ash borers are up in the canopy. And so the goal with the insecticide is to, and that's where the early spring treatment is critical. When the sap's moving up, that insecticide can get carried right on up through the tree to the top, and then try to kill any bugs and any bug larvae that are up there on the top of the tree. And so then over the next 2 or 3 years, it'll start looking like this tree that's over here in the corner of the yard. Has a nice deep green color, and that's what you want your ash trees to look like. And that's a sign of a healthy ash tree that's growing really well. And so we treated this here this past week with an insecticide to be sure that there's no bugs going around, no emerald ash borer, up in the canopy of that tree, because we want to keep this tree, to maintain this green space for Security Federal and the McMinnville community for many years to come.
Ben, folks, would like to find out more information about how they can get a hold of your consultation, more information about what you guys do with the forestry, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so my office is right downtown on Court Square in the old Hargrove building. It's 120 South Court Square. We've got a website, panthercreekforestry.com. You can check on there, send us an email. It may take us a few days to get back to you because we're often out in the woods and out treating trees. So but that's the best way is email or give us a call, stop by the office, and we can give you some more information.
Did you like that?
Oh, that was awesome, boss.
All right, now we're on our way to another wildflower location here in Middle Tennessee. Come on with us. Well, we've made it to Short Springs State Natural Area in Tullahoma, Tennessee. We're going to see some more beautiful wildflowers here at Short Springs. Come on with us. All right, we've run into the wildflowers here, and they're in abundance as you start down the hill toward the waterfall. We're looking at foam flowers right there, and we have entered Trillium City. Tons of white trillium, and they are some of our favorite wildflowers, and they are out in force here at Short Springs. I love seeing these. This is a nodding trillium or wake robin trillium. These are also found quite a few places here at Short Springs. We're down by the creek, and up from us is Machine Falls. We're not going to try to go there today because it is packed with people, so we're not going to try to get in the middle of all that. We're going to just look at the wildflowers. Again, this is a nodding trillium, very beautiful, deep maroon, yellow in the middle, gorgeous. And what about the geraniums? You find a lot of those around here too. Here's a beautiful hillside full of mayapple and phlox. Phlox, the purple flowers you see scattered about. Mayapple with the big leaves. Some of them will be blooming eventually. And the whole hillside is just covered with phlox and mayapple. Well, we've enjoyed our trip to Old Stone Fort and Short Springs State Natural Area today. It's been a fun hunt for wildflowers. Boy, did we find them. Been a lot of fun. Hope you've enjoyed it. We'll see you next time when we explore another Tennessee trail.